Most people don't realize their biggest enemy isn't the world around them but the thoughts they repeat every single day inside their own mind. You wake up in the morning and before your feet even touch the floor, your brain is already running through a list of things that could go wrong. You worry about a conversation that hasn't happened yet. You replay a mistake from last week as if thinking about it one more time will somehow fix it. You imagine worst-case scenarios for events that may never take place. And by the time you finally get out of bed, your energy is already half gone. This is not just a bad morning. For millions of people, this is every single morning. The pattern repeats day after day and week after week until it becomes so normal that you forget there was ever another way to live. You start to believe that this is just who you are. You tell yourself you've always been a worrier. You convince yourself that anxiety is part of your personality. But here is the truth that most people never hear. Negative thinking is not a permanent trait. It is a habit. And like any habit, it can be changed if you understand how it works and commit to doing something different one small step at a time. The thoughts you repeat most often are the ones that shape your reality. They influence how you see yourself and how you interact with other people. They determine whether you take a chance on something new or stay stuck in the same place year after year. They decide whether you feel capable or defeated before you even try. This is not about forcing yourself to smile when everything feels heavy. It is not about pretending that life is perfect when it clearly is not. It is about learning how to manage the way you think so that your thoughts serve you instead of working against you every single day. There is a common misunderstanding about what it means to be a positive person. When people hear the advice to think more positively, they usually assume it means ignoring problems and pretending everything is fine. They picture someone who walks around with a permanent smile, refusing to acknowledge anything difficult. But that is not real positivity. That is denial. And denial does not protect you from pain. It only delays it. A truly positive person does not avoid hard emotions. They feel fear and they feel sadness and they feel frustration just like everyone else. The difference is in what they do with those feelings after they arrive. They do not let a single bad emotion take over their entire day. They do not allow one difficult moment to define their entire week. They acknowledge what they feel and then they choose how to respond instead of reacting on autopilot. This is a skill and not a personality type. It is something you can practice and get better at over time regardless of how you grew up or what you have been through. The human brain is wired to focus more on negative information than positive information. This is not a flaw in your character. It is a survival mechanism that has been built into our biology over thousands of years. Our ancestors needed to pay close attention to threats in order to stay alive. A rustling in the bushes could mean a predator. A strange sound at night could mean danger. The people who noticed these threats quickly were the ones who survived long enough to pass on their genes. And so our brains evolved to prioritize anything that might be harmful or dangerous. This is why one critical comment can cancel out 10 compliments. This is why you can have a perfectly good day and then one small thing goes wrong and suddenly it feels like the whole day was ruined. This is why you remember your failures far more vividly than your successes. Your brain is doing exactly what it was designed to do. It is scanning for problems and holding on to negative experiences because it thinks this will keep you safe. But in the modern world, this survival mechanism often causes more harm than good. You are not running from predators anymore. You are sitting in traffic or checking your email or scrolling through social media. And yet your brain treats a rude comment online with the same urgency it would treat a physical threat. It floods your body with stress hormones and puts you in a state of high alert over situations that do not actually endanger your life. The problem is that most people do not realize this is happening. They assume their negative thoughts are accurate reflections of reality. They believe that if they feel anxious, then something must truly be wrong. They trust every worried thought as if it were a fact instead of recognizing it as just one possible interpretation of a situation. And this is where the real damage happens. When you believe every negative thought without questioning it, you give those thoughts the power to control your emotions and your behavior, and eventually your entire life. Consider a simple example. You send a message to a friend and several hours pass without a response. One person might notice the silence and think nothing of it. They assume their friend is busy or distracted and they move on with their day without giving it another thought. But another person receives that same silence and their mind immediately starts creating stories. They wonder if they said something wrong. They worry that their friend is upset with them. They replay their last conversation looking for clues about what they might have done to cause offense. They start to feel anxious and rejected even though nothing has actually happened. The only thing that changed is the story they told themselves about the situation. The silence was the same for both people. The facts were identical. But the interpretation was completely different. And it was the interpretation and not the event itself that created the emotional response. This happens constantly in everyday life. Two people can experience the exact same situation and walk away with completely different feelings about it. One person gets caught in the rain and thinks it ruined their plans. Another person gets caught in the same rain and decides to enjoy the sound of it hitting the pavement. One person receives constructive feedback at work and feels devastated. Another person receives the same feedback and feels motivated to improve. The event does not determine your emotional response. Your interpretation of the event determines your emotional response. And your interpretation is shaped by the thinking habits you have developed over time. If you have spent years practicing negative interpretations, then negativity will feel automatic and natural. It will seem like the only logical way to see things. But it is not the only way. It is simply the way you have trained your brain to respond. And with consistent effort you can train it to respond differently. This brings us to one of the most important truths about changing your mindset. Most people believe that they need to feel good before they can think positively. They wait for their circumstances to improve or for their mood to lift before they try to change their thoughts. But this is actually backwards. Research in psychology has shown again and again that thoughts influence feelings far more than feelings influence thoughts. When you change the way you think even slightly, your emotions begin to shift in response. And when your emotions shift, your behavior changes too. You start making different choices. You take different actions. And those actions create different results in your life. It is a cycle that feeds itself. Positive thoughts lead to better emotions, which lead to better actions, which lead to better outcomes, which reinforce the positive thoughts. But the same is true in reverse. Negative thoughts lead to painful emotions, which lead to avoidance, or inaction, which lead to poor outcomes, which reinforce the negative thoughts. The cycle you are in right now depends on which pattern you have been repeating. And the good news is that you can interrupt the negative cycle at any point by changing just one element. You do not have to overhaul your entire life overnight. You do not have to become a completely different person by tomorrow morning. You just have to start noticing your thoughts and questioning them instead of accepting them as absolute truth. One of the most damaging habits that people develop without realizing it is the habit of harsh self-talk. Throughout any given day, you have thousands of thoughts running through your mind. Many of these thoughts are directed at yourself. And if you pay close attention to what you are actually saying to yourself, you might be shocked by how cruel those words are. You would never speak to a friend the way you speak to yourself. You would never tell someone you care about that they are stupid or worthless or destined to fail. But you say these things to yourself constantly without even noticing. When you make a small mistake, you call yourself an idiot. When something does not go as planned, you tell yourself that you always mess things up. When you fall short of a goal, you conclude that you are simply not good enough and never will be. These words might seem harmless because they happen inside your head where no one else can hear them. But they are not harmless. They are shaping your self-image every single day. They are building a version of yourself inside your mind that is weak and incapable and unworthy. And the more you repeat those words, the more you start to believe them. Your brain does not distinguish between things that are said to you by others and things you say to yourself. It processes all of it the same way. So when you constantly tell yourself that you are not good enough, your brain accepts that as information and starts looking for evidence to confirm it. It filters your experiences through that belief and shows you all the ways you have failed while ignoring the ways you have succeeded. This is called confirmation bias, and it works in both directions. If you believe you are incapable, your brain will find proof that you are incapable. But if you begin to believe that you are capable and growing and learning, your brain will start finding proof of that instead. People who maintain a positive outlook on life are not people who never make mistakes. They make just as many mistakes as everyone else. The difference is in how they respond to those mistakes. When they fall short of a goal, they do not waste time beating themselves up about it. They acknowledge what happened and then they immediately shift their focus to what they can do next. They ask themselves what they can learn from the experience. They look for ways to improve instead of looking for reasons to quit. They treat failure as information rather than as a verdict on their worth as a person. This is not something that comes naturally to most people. It requires practice. It requires catching yourself in the moment when you start to spiral into self-criticism and making a conscious choice to respond differently. At first it will feel forced and unnatural. You might not even believe the kinder words you are saying to yourself. But over time, with repetition, your brain will begin to accept these new messages just as readily as it accepted the old negative ones. The key is consistency. You did not develop your negative thinking patterns overnight, and you will not replace them overnight either. But every single time you choose a different response, you are laying down a new neural pathway. You are teaching your brain a new habit. And eventually that new habit will become just as automatic as the old one used to be. Your thoughts change constantly throughout the day. One moment you might feel confident and motivated, and the next moment a single comment or a small setback can send you into a spiral of doubt. This is completely normal. The goal is not to eliminate negative thoughts entirely because that is impossible. The goal is to change your relationship with those thoughts so that they no longer have the power to derail your entire day. A negative thought is just a thought. It is not a fact. It is not a prediction of the future. It is not evidence of your worth or your potential. It is simply one of thousands of mental events that pass through your awareness every day. You get to decide how much attention you give it. You get to decide whether you engage with it or let it pass. Most negative thoughts follow predictable patterns. They sound like this: what if I fail again? That person probably does not like me. I am not smart enough for this. Things never work out for me. I should not even bother trying. These thoughts feel convincing because they come from inside your own mind. They feel like your own voice telling you the truth about yourself and your life. But if you step back and examine them honestly, you will often find that they are based on assumptions rather than facts. They are projections of fear rather than accurate assessments of reality. They are worst-case scenarios masquerading as likely outcomes. When you notice a negative thought arising, the most powerful thing you can do is pause and ask yourself one simple question. Is this actually true, or is this just what I am afraid might be true? Most of the time you will find that you are worrying about something that has not happened and may never happen. You are reacting to a story you created in your own mind rather than to something that is actually occurring in the real world. This distinction matters enormously because your body responds to your thoughts as if they were real. When you imagine a stressful scenario, your heart rate increases and your muscles tense, and your breathing becomes shallow. Your body does not know the difference between a real threat and an imagined one. So every time you run a worst-case scenario in your mind, you are putting your body through stress for no reason. You are using up energy and mental resources fighting problems that do not exist. And by the time you actually need that energy for a real challenge, you have already depleted it on imaginary ones. This is one of the reasons why chronic worriers feel exhausted even when they have not done anything physically demanding. Their bodies have been in a state of low-level stress all day long because their minds have been running through one frightening scenario after another. They lie in bed at night unable to sleep because their brain will not stop generating new things to worry about. They wake up in the morning feeling tired because their nervous system never fully relaxed during the night. This is not a life anyone would choose deliberately. But it becomes the default when you allow your thoughts to run unchecked without ever questioning their validity. People who live with a more positive mindset have learned to distinguish between productive concern and unproductive worry. Productive concern is when you identify a real problem and take action to address it. You notice that a deadline is approaching, so you sit down and start working. You realize that your health has been declining, so you schedule a doctor's appointment. You recognize that a relationship needs attention, so you have an honest conversation. This kind of thinking leads to solutions. Unproductive worry is when you identify a potential problem and then simply repeat it in your mind without taking any action. You think about the deadline, but you do not start working. You worry about your health, but you do not make changes. You stress about the relationship, but you do not communicate. Instead, you just keep turning the worry over and over in your mind as if thinking about it enough times will somehow resolve it. But it never does. Worry without action is just suffering with no purpose. The difference between these two responses is enormous in terms of their impact on your life. One leads to progress and relief. The other leads to exhaustion and deeper anxiety. Positive thinkers are not people who never worry. They simply convert their worry into action as quickly as possible. When they notice themselves beginning to spiral, they ask, "What can I actually do about this right now?" If the answer is something, then they do it. If the answer is nothing, then they make a conscious decision to let it go until they can take action. This is not easy, and it does not happen automatically. It requires practice and patience and self-awareness. But it is a skill that anyone can develop over time. Another critical element in building a more positive life is the way you talk to yourself when things go wrong. The words you use matter more than you might think. There is a significant difference between saying "I failed" and saying "I am a failure." The first is a statement about an event. The second is a statement about your identity. When you say I failed, you are describing something that happened. It was a single event in time, and it does not define who you are. When you say I am a failure, you are making a permanent judgment about your entire being based on one experience. This kind of language traps you because it leaves no room for growth or change. If you believe you are a failure, then why would you try again? The label itself becomes a prison. But if you understand that failure is something that happens to you and not something you are, then you can pick yourself up and try again without carrying the weight of that identity. People who maintain positive self-regard are careful about the language they use internally. They say things like that did not work out the way I hoped, but I can try a different approach. They say I am still learning, and it is okay to make mistakes along the way. They say this was a tough day, but it does not mean every day will be like this. These are not empty affirmations. They are accurate and balanced interpretations of reality. They acknowledge the difficulty without catastrophizing it. They accept the setback without generalizing it to every area of life. And they leave the door open for improvement and growth. Self-worth is not something that should fluctuate based on your latest performance. You are not more valuable on the days you succeed and less valuable on the days you struggle. Your worth as a person is constant regardless of what happens to you or what mistakes you make. But many people tie their entire sense of self to their achievements. When things go well, they feel good about themselves. When things go poorly, they feel worthless. This creates an incredibly unstable emotional life because external circumstances are always changing. You cannot control whether you get the job or whether the relationship works out or whether people approve of your choices. If your self-worth depends on these things, then you will be constantly at the mercy of forces outside your control. A more stable approach is to separate your worth from your performance. You can acknowledge that you did not perform well in a specific situation, while still recognizing that you are a person deserving of respect and kindness, including from yourself. This is not arrogance. It is basic self-compassion. And it is the foundation upon which all genuine confidence is built. Confidence does not come from never failing. It comes from knowing that you can fail and still be okay. It comes from trusting that you have the ability to recover and adapt and try again. And that trust is built through experience. Every time you face a difficulty and come out the other side, you add a small deposit to your confidence account. Over time, those deposits accumulate, and you develop a deep inner knowing that you can handle whatever life throws at you. But you only get those deposits if you actually face the difficulties instead of avoiding them. Avoidance might feel safer in the moment, but it robs you of the opportunity to prove to yourself that you are stronger than you think. One of the most important things to understand about building a positive mindset is that it does not require dramatic changes or grand gestures. It is built through small, consistent actions repeated over time. People often believe that they need some kind of major breakthrough or life-changing event to shift their perspective. They wait for inspiration to strike or for circumstances to improve before they start thinking differently. But transformation rarely works that way. It happens gradually through tiny shifts in daily behavior that compound over time. Think of it like physical exercise. If someone wants to get stronger, they do not need to lift the heaviest weight on their first day at the gym. In fact, trying to do too much too soon usually leads to injury or burnout. Instead, they start with a weight they can manage and they show up consistently day after day. Each session builds on the one before. The progress is so gradual that it is often invisible from day to day. But after weeks and months the change becomes undeniable. Their body has transformed not because of any single workout but because of the accumulated effect of hundreds of small efforts. Positive thinking works exactly the same way. You do not need to transform your entire mindset in a single day. You just need to make one slightly different choice each time you notice yourself falling into a negative pattern. Instead of believing the worst about a situation, you pause and consider an alternative explanation. Instead of criticizing yourself harshly, you offer yourself the same kindness you would offer a friend. Instead of dwelling on what went wrong, you redirect your attention to what you can do next. Each of these choices is small on its own, but repeated hundreds and thousands of times, they reshape the way your brain processes information. They create new default patterns that gradually replace the old ones. And one day you realize that you are responding to challenges differently than you used to. Not because you force yourself to change overnight, but because you practiced a better way of thinking so many times that it became natural. Your environment plays a much larger role in your mental state than most people realize. You might believe that your thoughts are entirely your own, generated independently by your willpower and personality. But the truth is that you are constantly being influenced by the people around you and the information you consume and the physical spaces you inhabit. If you spend most of your time around people who complain constantly and see the worst in every situation, their negativity will seep into your own thinking whether you intend it to or not. Humans are social creatures and we naturally absorb the emotional energy of those around us. This is not a weakness. It is simply how we are wired. But it means that you need to be intentional about the environments you place yourself in. If you want to think more positively, you need to surround yourself with people and information and experiences that support that goal. This does not mean cutting out everyone who has ever expressed a negative emotion. It means being aware of patterns. If certain people consistently leave you feeling drained and hopeless after every interaction, it is worth considering whether that relationship is serving your growth. If certain media sources consistently fill you with rage and fear, it might be time to reduce your exposure. You do not have to announce these changes or make them dramatic. You can simply start spending a little more time with people who inspire you and a little less time with people who drain you. You can replace 30 minutes of doom scrolling with 30 minutes of reading something that expands your perspective. You can take a walk outside instead of sitting in a dark room staring at a screen. These changes might seem insignificant in isolation, but they shift the overall balance of inputs your brain receives throughout the day. And over time, that shift in inputs leads to a shift in outputs. Your thoughts begin to change because the raw material feeding them has changed. Physical environment matters too. A cluttered, disorganized space can create a subtle sense of chaos and overwhelm that affects your thinking without you even realizing it. Taking 10 minutes to tidy your desk or open a window or let natural light into the room can change your mental state in surprising ways. Going for a short walk, especially in nature, has been shown to reduce stress and improve mood more effectively than many people expect. These are not complicated strategies. They do not require money or special equipment or advanced knowledge. They just require the willingness to try something different when you notice that your mind is stuck in a negative loop. Sometimes the simplest interventions are the most effective precisely because they are easy to do and can be repeated every day without effort. There is another important truth that anyone seeking a more positive life must accept. Perfection is not the goal. You will never reach a point where you never have another negative thought or never feel anxious or never experience doubt. That is not how human beings work. Even the most positive and resilient people have bad days. They feel frustrated and discouraged and uncertain just like everyone else. The difference is that they do not expect themselves to be perfect. They give themselves permission to struggle. They allow themselves to have hard days without concluding that they have failed at life. This acceptance is not giving up. It is actually a form of strength. When you stop demanding perfection from yourself, you remove an enormous source of pressure and self-criticism. You create space to be human. And paradoxically, that space often allows you to perform better because you are no longer paralyzed by the fear of falling short. Many people sabotage their own progress by setting impossibly high standards and then condemning themselves when they inevitably fail to meet them. They decide that if they cannot be positive all the time, then there is no point in trying at all. This is black and white thinking, and it is one of the most common cognitive traps. The reality is that progress is not linear. You will have good days and bad days. You will have moments of clarity and moments of confusion. You will catch yourself falling back into old patterns even after you thought you had moved past them. And all of that is normal. It does not mean you are failing. It means you are human. The goal is not to never fall down. The goal is to get back up each time a little faster than the last. When you look at people who seem to handle life with grace and resilience, you might assume they were born that way. You might think they have some innate quality that you lack. But in most cases, what you are seeing is the result of years of practice. They were not always calm in the face of adversity. They learned to be. They were not always quick to recover from setbacks. They practiced until recovery became faster. They were not always kind to themselves. They worked at it until self-compassion became a habit. You are seeing the finished product without knowing the long process that created it. And that process is available to you too. It does not matter where you are starting from. It does not matter how long you have been stuck in negative patterns. It does not matter how many times you have tried and given up before. Every single day is a new opportunity to practice. Every single moment offers a choice. And every choice you make either reinforces the old pattern or begins to build a new one. One of the most powerful shifts you can make is learning to focus on what you can control rather than what you cannot. So much human suffering comes from trying to control things that are fundamentally outside our power. You cannot control what other people think of you. You cannot control whether someone responds to your message quickly or slowly. You cannot control the weather or the economy or the decisions that other people make. You cannot control whether you get sick or whether someone you love leaves. These things are beyond your reach no matter how much you worry about them. And worrying about them does not give you any power over them. It only steals your peace without providing any benefit in return. What you can control is how you respond. You can control your own actions and your own attitude and your own effort. You can control whether you show up and try your best today. You can control whether you treat people with kindness. You can control whether you take care of your body and your mind. You can control whether you keep going after a setback or whether you quit. When you shift your focus from what you cannot control to what you can control, something remarkable happens. The anxiety begins to decrease because you are no longer fighting battles you cannot win. You stop wasting energy on things that are not yours to fix. And you start directing that energy toward the things that actually matter and that you actually have the power to change. This is not about giving up on your goals or accepting a lesser life. It is about being strategic with your energy. It is about recognizing that you have a limited amount of mental and emotional resources each day, and choosing to invest them where they will actually make a difference. Gratitude is another practice that has a profound effect on how you experience life. And like everything else we have discussed, it is a skill that improves with practice rather than a feeling that simply arrives on its own. Most people think of gratitude as something you feel after something good happens. You get a promotion and you feel grateful. Someone does something kind for you and you feel thankful. But this reactive form of gratitude is limited because it depends entirely on external events. A more powerful form of gratitude is the proactive kind. This is when you deliberately look for things to appreciate even when nothing extraordinary has happened. You notice the warmth of sunlight coming through your window. You appreciate the fact that you woke up this morning with another day ahead of you. You feel thankful for a friend who checks in on you, or for a meal that filled your stomach, or for a body that carried you through the day even when you were tired. These things are always present, but most people never notice them because they are too focused on what is missing or what went wrong. When you train yourself to look for what is good, you begin to see it everywhere. Not because your circumstances changed, but because your attention shifted. And where your attention goes, your emotions follow. People who practice gratitude regularly report feeling happier and more satisfied with their lives even when their objective circumstances have not changed at all. They sleep better. They have more energy. They experience less stress and less depression. This is not wishful thinking. It is supported by decades of research in positive psychology. The simple act of noticing what is good in your life on a regular basis rewires your brain to pay more attention to positive experiences and less attention to negative ones. It counteracts the natural negativity bias that evolution gave us. And over time, it fundamentally changes how you experience being alive. But let us be clear about something. Gratitude does not mean ignoring your problems or pretending that everything is fine when it is not. You can be grateful for what you have while still working to improve your situation. You can appreciate your current life while still striving for something better. These are not contradictions. In fact, they work together. When you feel grateful for what you have, you operate from a place of abundance rather than scarcity. You make decisions from a place of confidence rather than desperation. You pursue goals because you want to grow rather than because you feel inadequate. And this makes you far more likely to succeed because you are not driven by fear and self-doubt, but by genuine desire and self-belief. Life will always present challenges. There will be days when everything seems to go wrong. There will be moments when you feel overwhelmed and uncertain and afraid. There will be losses that hurt deeply and failures that shake your confidence to its core. None of this can be avoided no matter how positive your mindset becomes. But what changes with a positive mindset is your ability to recover. It is your resilience. It is the speed at which you bounce back from difficulty and find your footing again. A positive mindset does not prevent storms from coming. It gives you a stronger foundation to stand on when they arrive. Think of it like a tree in a windstorm. The tree does not try to stop the wind. It cannot control the weather. But a tree with deep roots and a flexible trunk can bend without breaking. It can withstand powerful gusts that would snap a more rigid tree in half. Your mindset is like those roots. The deeper and stronger it becomes through practice, the more you can withstand without being destroyed. You become someone who can face adversity without losing yourself in it. Someone who can experience pain without being consumed by it. Someone who can fail without believing they are a failure. The people who seem to have the happiest lives are not the ones with the fewest problems. Research consistently shows that happiness is not strongly correlated with wealth or status or external achievement beyond a basic level of security and comfort. The happiest people are those who have developed the ability to find satisfaction in ordinary moments. They do not need extraordinary events to feel good. They do not need constant excitement, or achievement, or validation from others. They have learned to extract joy from simple daily experiences that most people overlook completely. A quiet morning with a cup of coffee. A conversation with someone they care about. The feeling of finishing a task they have been putting off. The beauty of a sunset they happen to notice. These small moments are available to everyone every single day, but they only register for people who have trained their attention to notice them. There is a powerful question you can ask yourself at the end of each day that will gradually shift your entire perspective. Instead of asking what went wrong today, ask what went right. Instead of reviewing your mistakes and failures, review the moments where you showed up and tried your best. Think about one thing you accomplished, no matter how small. Think about one moment that made you smile, or one interaction that felt meaningful. This is not about ignoring problems. You can still address what needs to be fixed. But by deliberately focusing your attention on what went well, you counterbalance the brain's natural tendency to fixate on the negative. You remind yourself that your day contained good moments too, even if they were overshadowed by difficulties. And over time, this practice changes the overall emotional tone of your life. You begin to see yourself not as someone who constantly struggles, but as someone who is growing and learning and making progress, even if that progress is sometimes slow. The person you spend the most time with in your entire life is yourself. You are with yourself from the moment you wake up until the moment you fall asleep every single day for as long as you live. No other relationship even comes close to that level of constant contact. And yet most people treat themselves worse than they would treat a stranger. They speak to themselves with contempt and impatience and cruelty. They hold themselves to standards they would never impose on anyone else. They refuse to forgive themselves for things they would easily forgive in others. If you would not say it to someone you love, then you should not be saying it to yourself. This is not about letting yourself off the hook or avoiding accountability. You can hold yourself responsible for your actions while still treating yourself with basic human dignity. You can acknowledge your mistakes while still respecting yourself as a person who is trying their best with the resources they have. You can push yourself to improve while still offering yourself compassion when you fall short. These are not opposing forces. They work together to create a healthy and sustainable relationship with yourself. Starting today, you can begin to change the words you use when you talk to yourself. When you catch yourself saying, "Why can't I do anything right?" try replacing it with, "I am still learning and that is okay." When you hear yourself saying, "I always mess everything up," try replacing it with, "That did not go as planned, but I can figure out what to do next." When you notice the thought, "I am not good enough," try replacing it with, "I am enough as I am right now, and I am also growing." These replacements might feel awkward at first. They might feel forced or even dishonest. That is normal. You have been speaking to yourself harshly for years and the new language will feel unfamiliar. But keep practicing anyway. With enough repetition, the new words will begin to feel natural. And as they become natural, your self-image will begin to shift. You will start to see yourself as someone who is capable and resilient and worthy of good things. Not because you achieved something extraordinary, but because you changed the conversation happening inside your own mind. Many people want their lives to change, but they keep thinking the same thoughts every day. They worry the same way they have always worried. They doubt themselves the same way they have always doubted. They interpret events through the same negative filter they have used for years. And then they wonder why nothing ever improves. But you cannot think the same thoughts and expect different results. Your thoughts create your feelings. Your feelings drive your actions. Your actions determine your outcomes. If you want different outcomes, you need different actions. And different actions require different feelings. And different feelings begin with different thoughts. This is the chain that connects your inner world to your outer world. And the first link in that chain is always thought. Some people believe that only naturally optimistic people can live a positive life. They think positivity is a genetic trait like eye color or height. Either you have it or you do not. But this is simply not true. Studies of identical twins raised in different environments show that while there is a genetic component to temperament, a significant portion of your outlook on life is determined by your habits and choices and environment. You are not trapped by your genes. You are not destined to be negative just because your parents were negative or because you grew up in a difficult environment. You have the ability to choose differently at any moment. And every time you make that choice, you strengthen the neural pathways associated with positive thinking while weakening the ones associated with negativity. When difficulties arise, and they will, the question is not whether you will feel pain. You will. The question is how long you stay in that pain and what you do while you are there. Some people experience a setback and spend weeks or months ruminating on it. They replay it from every angle. They imagine how things could have been different. They blame themselves or others or the universe. And while they are stuck in this cycle of rumination, life continues to move forward without them. They miss new opportunities because they are too consumed with old failures. Other people experience the same setback and allow themselves to feel the pain fully for a time. They do not suppress it or deny it. But they also do not set up permanent residence in it. They grieve what was lost and then they turn their attention forward. They ask themselves what comes next. They look for the lesson or the opportunity hidden within the difficulty. And they begin to move again. This is not because they feel the pain less. It is because they have made a conscious decision not to let pain become their permanent address. They visit it when necessary, but they do not live there. The direction of your life is not determined by the events that happen to you. It is determined by how you respond to those events. Two people can experience the exact same failure. One decides it is proof that they should never try again. The other decides it is one step closer to eventual success. Same event but completely different trajectories going forward. One person shrinks and the other grows. And the only difference between them is the story they tell themselves about what the failure means. You get to choose your story. You get to decide what your experiences mean. You get to determine whether a closed door is the end of the road or a redirection towards something better. This power of interpretation is one of the greatest gifts you possess as a human being. No one can take it from you. No matter what happens to you externally, you always retain the ability to choose how you frame it internally. And that choice, more than any external circumstance, determines the quality of your life. Living positively does not mean being happy all the time. It does not mean wearing a smile when your heart is breaking. It does not mean pretending that grief and anger and fear do not exist. These emotions are part of being human, and they deserve to be felt fully and honestly. A positive life is one where you can experience the full range of human emotion without being destroyed by any single feeling. It is a life where you can be knocked down and still find the strength to stand up again. It is a life where hard days exist but they do not define you. Where failures occur but they do not own you. Where uncertainty is present but it does not paralyze you. This kind of life is available to anyone who is willing to practice. It does not require special talent or extraordinary willpower or perfect circumstances. It requires only the daily decision to try again. To show up for yourself one more time. To choose a slightly better thought. To take one small action in the direction you want to go. At the end of your life, you will not be measured by how many times you fell. You will be measured by how many times you got back up. You will not be defined by your worst days. You will be defined by what you did on the days that followed them. Every person you admire for their strength and resilience has a history full of struggle and failure and doubt. They simply refused to let those things be the end of their story. They kept turning the page. They kept writing new chapters. And you can do the same thing starting right now in this very moment. You do not need to wait for the perfect time or the perfect conditions. You do not need anyone's permission or approval. You just need to make one small choice. Choose to speak to yourself with kindness today. Choose to focus on what you can control today. Choose to notice one thing you are grateful for today. Choose to take one small action instead of worrying today. These choices seem small in the moment. They do not feel like they are changing anything. But they are. Every single one of them is a seed being planted. And seeds that are watered daily eventually grow into something you cannot ignore. A positive mindset is not a talent you are born with. It is the strongest attitude you can build for your life. It is forged through daily choices and consistent practice, and the willingness to try again after every setback. It does not arrive as a gift from the universe. It is something you create for yourself, one thought at a time, one day at a time. And the beautiful thing about it is that you can start right now. Not tomorrow. Not next week. Not when things get easier. Right now. Today. With the very next thought that enters your mind. You get to choose what to do with it. You get to decide whether it controls you or whether you control it. That choice, repeated thousands of times, is what ultimately determines the shape of your life. The thoughts you think today become the actions you take tomorrow. The actions you take tomorrow become the habits you carry next month. The habits you carry next month become the character you build next year. And the character you build next year becomes the life you live for decades to come. It all starts with one thought. One choice. One moment of awareness where you decide to do something different. That is all it takes to begin. And beginning is always the hardest part. Once you start, the momentum builds on its own. Each positive choice makes the next one slightly easier. Each small victory gives you slightly more confidence. Each day of practice makes the new patterns slightly more natural. Until one day you look back and realize that you are no longer the person you used to be. Not because something dramatic happened, but because you showed up for yourself quietly and consistently day after day until the change became undeniable. That is the power of small repeated choices. That is how lives are truly transformed. Not in a single moment of inspiration, but in the thousands of ordinary moments where you chose to think and act and speak just a little bit differently than you did before. Your life will not change because of one decision. But it will change because of one decision made again and again and again until it becomes who you are.